The Stoic Path to Unshakable Inner Strength. Ancient wisdom for modern chaos. Listen carefully, because what I'm about to share with you has the power to transform how you experience every single day of your life. We live in a world that constantly demands our reaction, that pulls at our attention, that tries to steal our peace with every notification, every opinion, every unexpected challenge. Society has convinced us that we're supposed to feel everything intensely, react to everything instantly, and carry the weight of everyone else's chaos on our shoulders. But what if I told you that over 2,000 years ago, the ancient Stoics discovered a completely different way of moving through the world? What if the secret to unshakable strength isn't found in building thicker walls around your heart, but in understanding exactly where your true power lives? Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who ruled Rome during some of its darkest times, wrote something in his personal journal that should be carved into every human heart. He said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Think about the profound simplicity of that statement. Everything that disturbs you, everything that throws you off balance, everything that makes you feel weak or vulnerable, all of it exists because you've forgotten where your real power lives. Not in controlling what happens to you, but in mastering how you respond to what happens. The Stoics weren't mystics sitting in caves avoiding the world. They were soldiers, statesmen, and leaders who faced unimaginable pressures. They dealt with war, betrayal, loss, and the constant weight of responsibility. Yet they developed a philosophy so powerful that it allowed them to remain centered in the midst of absolute chaos. They learned to separate what they could control from what they couldn't. They mastered the art of responding rather than reacting. They discovered that true strength isn't about never feeling challenged. It's about never being broken by those challenges. Today, I'm going to share with you 8 transformative principles that will teach you how to become emotionally unshakable, mentally resilient, and spiritually free. These aren't just beautiful ideas. They're practical tools that you can apply immediately to change how you experience stress, conflict, disappointment, and uncertainty. By the end of this journey, you'll understand exactly how to protect your inner peace no matter what storms rage around you, and you'll realize that the power you've been searching for outside yourself has been waiting inside you all along. Before we dive into this life-changing wisdom, I need you to make a commitment right now. Hit that like button to signal that you're ready to take responsibility for your inner world. If this message speaks to something deep within you, type this in the comments and let it anchor in your consciousness. My strength comes from within, not from circumstances. Share this video with someone who's struggling to find their footing in this chaotic world. Subscribe to this channel because we're building a community of people who refuse to be victims of their circumstances. And please don't skip any part of this video because each principle builds on the previous one, creating a complete system for inner strength. The foundation of ownership. Here's a truth that will either liberate you or challenge everything you believe about your problems. Nothing and no one can make you feel anything without your permission. Right now you might be thinking, that's not true. When someone insults me, I feel hurt. When something unfair happens, I feel angry. When I lose something important, I feel devastated. But here's what the Stoics understood that most people miss. The event itself isn't what creates your emotional experience. It's the meaning you assign to that event. It's the story you tell yourself about what happened. It's the judgment you attach to circumstances. Epictetus, who spent years as a slave before becoming one of history's greatest teachers of freedom, said something revolutionary. People are not disturbed by things, but by the views they take of them. This single insight contains enough power to transform your entire emotional life. When you truly understand this, you realize that you've been handing your power away to everything and everyone around you. You've been making other people and external circumstances responsible for your internal state. And that's exactly why you feel so vulnerable, so reactive, so at the mercy of forces beyond your control. Think about 2 people experiencing the exact same situation. One person loses a job and sees it as a catastrophe, as proof of their inadequacy, as evidence that life is unfair. They spiral into depression and bitterness. Another person loses the same job and sees it as an opportunity to reassess their path, as freedom to pursue something they actually care about, as a challenge that will make them stronger. Same event, completely different experience. What's the difference? Not the circumstances, but the ownership they take of their interpretation. When you accept complete ownership of your emotional responses, something miraculous happens. You stop being a victim. You stop waiting for the world to change so you can feel better. You stop giving other people the power to determine whether you have a good day or a bad day. Instead, you become the author of your own experience. You recognize that while you can't control what happens to you, you have absolute control over what you do with what happens to you. This doesn't mean you won't feel emotions. The Stoics felt everything just as deeply as anyone else. But they didn't let those emotions control them. They didn't mistake a feeling for a fact. They didn't confuse a temporary emotional response with their permanent identity. When anger arose, they acknowledged it without acting on it. When fear appeared, they noticed it without being paralyzed by it. When sadness washed over them, they felt it without drowning in it. Here's how you practice ownership in your daily life. First, catch yourself every time you use the phrase, "they made me feel," or "this situation makes me," and immediately correct it. Change it to, "I chose to feel," or "I interpreted this situation as." This simple language shift reminds you where your power lives. Second, when something disturbs you, pause and ask yourself, what meaning am I assigning to this event? Is there another way to interpret what just happened? This question alone creates space between the event and your reaction. Third, take full responsibility for your emotional state regardless of circumstances. Stop waiting for conditions to improve before you choose peace, joy, or strength. The Stoics knew that ownership is the foundation of freedom. As long as you believe that your emotional well-being depends on things outside your control, you'll live in constant vulnerability. But the moment you take complete ownership of your inner world, you become unshakable. The world can throw anything at you, but it cannot touch the core of who you are. That power, that choice, that freedom. It's yours right now if you're willing to claim it. The practice of deliberate perception. Seneca once wrote something that should fundamentally change how you process every experience. He said, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality." This reveals something profound about human suffering. Most of the pain you experience doesn't come from what actually happens. It comes from how you perceive what happens. It comes from the lens through which you view events. It comes from the filter your mind applies to raw reality. Your perception is not neutral. Your mind is constantly interpreting, judging, and creating stories about everything you experience. Someone doesn't respond to your message, and your mind creates a story about being ignored or disrespected. A plan falls through, and your mind creates a narrative about bad luck or life being against you. A person acts in a way you don't like, and your mind generates an entire drama about their intentions and your victimhood. But here's the powerful truth: none of these stories are facts. They're interpretations. And if they're interpretations, that means you can choose different ones. The Stoics practiced something they called examining impressions. Whenever something happened, they would pause before reacting and examine the story their mind was creating. They would ask, is this interpretation true? Is it helpful? Is it necessary? Or is there a wiser way to perceive this situation? This practice gave them extraordinary power over their emotional experience, because they realized that most suffering comes from perception, not from reality itself. Let's make this practical with some everyday examples. You send someone a message and they don't respond for hours. Your initial perception might be, they're ignoring me. They don't value our relationship. I'm not important to them. This perception creates hurt and resentment. But what if you deliberately chose a different perception? They're probably busy. They might respond when they have time. This has nothing to do with my worth. Same situation, completely different emotional experience. Or imagine someone criticizes your work. One perception is, they think I'm incompetent. I'm not good enough. I'll never succeed. This perception creates shame and discouragement. An alternative perception might be, they're offering feedback that could help me improve. This is information, not an attack on my identity. I can use this to grow stronger. Again, same event, radically different impact. The key is understanding that your first perception, your automatic interpretation, isn't necessarily true or helpful. It's just habitual. Your mind has patterns, grooves it falls into, default stories it tells. But you're not obligated to accept those default stories. You have the power to deliberately choose perceptions that serve your strength, your peace, and your growth. This isn't about denial or pretending bad things aren't bad. It's about refusing to make things worse than they are through catastrophic interpretation. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself, choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been. This was his way of practicing deliberate perception. He recognized that harm isn't what happens to you. Harm is what you allow to affect your inner peace, and you control that through the perceptions you choose to adopt. Start practicing deliberate perception today. When something disturbs you, stop and write down the story your mind is telling about what happened. Then challenge yourself to write 3 alternative interpretations of the same event. Notice how different each interpretation makes you feel. Then consciously choose the perception that gives you the most power, peace, and wisdom. Over time, this practice rewires your mind. Your default perceptions become wiser, calmer, and more empowering. You stop being a victim of your automatic thoughts and become the conscious director of your inner narrative. The strength in acceptance. One of the most misunderstood concepts in Stoic philosophy is acceptance. People hear acceptance and think it means passivity, resignation, or giving up. But that's not what the Stoics meant at all. Stoic acceptance is one of the most active, powerful practices you can develop. It's the recognition that resistance to reality is the source of most human suffering, and when you stop fighting against what is, you free up enormous energy to work with what is. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Accept whatever comes to you woven in the pattern of your destiny, for what could more aptly fit your needs." This isn't about believing that everything happens for a reason, or that the universe is personally arranging events for your benefit. It's about recognizing that reality is reality, whether you accept it or not. Your resistance doesn't change what has already happened. It only adds suffering to circumstances. When you practice acceptance, you're not saying, "I like this," or "this is good." You're simply saying, "This is what is, and I will work with it rather than exhaust myself fighting against it." Think about a river encountering a boulder. The river doesn't sit upstream complaining about the boulder, wishing it wasn't there, getting angry that someone put it in the way. The river simply flows around it, over it, or gradually shapes it. The river accepts the boulder as part of the landscape and adjusts accordingly. This is the model for human strength that the Stoics followed. When you encounter obstacles, disappointments, or unwanted circumstances, acceptance allows you to stop wasting energy on resistance and start using that energy for navigation. Let's look at what acceptance looks like in practice. You lose a job you valued. Non-acceptance sounds like, "This shouldn't have happened. It's not fair. Why me? My life is ruined." This mindset keeps you stuck in bitterness and prevents you from moving forward. Acceptance sounds like, "This has happened. I don't like it, but it's the current reality. Now, what's my wisest response? What opportunities might this create? How can I move forward from here?" Notice that acceptance doesn't mean you're happy about the loss. It means you're not adding additional suffering by fighting against reality, or consider a relationship that ends. Without acceptance, you might spend months or years replaying what went wrong, imagining different outcomes, staying bitter about how things should have been different. This resistance keeps you trapped in the past and prevents healing. With acceptance, you acknowledge, "This relationship has ended. I feel sadness and loss, and that's okay. But I accept this new reality and I'm open to what comes next." Acceptance doesn't mean you don't grieve. It means your grief moves through you instead of becoming a permanent state. The Stoics understood something profound about the relationship between acceptance and action. They knew that acceptance of reality is what makes effective action possible. When you're busy resisting what is, you can't see clearly what to do next. Your energy goes into denial, complaint, and wishful thinking, instead of into creative problem solving and forward movement. But when you fully accept reality, even harsh reality, suddenly your mind becomes clear. You stop arguing with facts and start working with them. Epictetus taught his students to distinguish clearly between what is in their control and what isn't. Everything outside your control, accept it. Don't waste energy wishing it were different. Everything within your control, specifically your thoughts, your choices, your actions, take full responsibility for it. This creates a powerful dynamic where you're simultaneously accepting reality and actively shaping your response to reality. You're not passive. You're strategically engaged with what is rather than what you wish was. Practice acceptance this week by noticing every time you find yourself thinking, "This shouldn't be happening," or "They shouldn't have done that," or "It should be different." These thoughts are markers of resistance. When you catch them, replace them with, "This is happening. This is the current reality. Now what's my wisest response?" You'll be amazed at how much mental and emotional energy this simple shift frees up. Energy that was trapped in resistance becomes available for wisdom, creativity, and effective action. The discipline of response selection. Between every stimulus and every response, there exists a space. In that space lives your freedom and your power. Most people live their entire lives without ever discovering this space. They experience something and immediately react based on conditioning, habit, and impulse. Someone says something hurtful, and they instantly snap back. A frustration arises, and they immediately complain. A challenge appears, and they reflexively panic. But the Stoics trained themselves to expand that space, to pause between stimulus and response, and to consciously choose their reaction rather than being controlled by automatic patterns. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." This is the essence of response selection. No matter what happens to you, you always have the power to choose how you respond. That power might be the only power you have in certain situations, but it's always there, and it's always enough. Think about how most people operate. Something happens and they react instantly based on whatever emotion arises first. This creates a life of constant reactivity, where you're controlled by circumstances, other people's behavior, and your own unexamined impulses. You become a puppet whose strings are pulled by every external event. But when you practice response selection, you cut those strings. You reclaim your autonomy. You become someone who responds consciously, rather than reacting unconsciously. Here's what response selection looks like in practice. Someone insults you in front of others. Your immediate impulse might be to insult them back, to defend yourself aggressively, or to collapse in embarrassment. But if you've trained yourself in response selection, you pause. In that pause, you examine your options. You could respond with anger, but would that serve you? You could respond with silence and dignity, showing that their words don't control you. You could respond with a calm question that puts the responsibility back on them. You consciously select the response that aligns with your values and your goals rather than just reacting from emotion. Or imagine you receive news that a major plan has fallen through. The reactive impulse might be panic, despair, or anger at whoever or whatever caused the failure. But with response selection, you pause and ask yourself, what response would my wisest self choose here? How would the person I'm becoming handle the situation? What action would I respect myself for tomorrow? This creates space for wisdom to enter where only impulse existed before. The Stoics practiced response selection through daily training. They would mentally rehearse challenging situations and consciously choose how they would respond. Seneca would imagine losing his wealth, facing criticism, or encountering betrayal. Then he would decide in advance how he would maintain his character and composure in those situations. When similar challenges actually arose, he wasn't caught off guard by his own reactions because he had already trained his response. You can develop this same discipline starting today. First, identify your most common triggers, the situations that typically cause you to react in ways you later regret. Maybe it's criticism, disrespect, plans changing, or feeling controlled. Second, for each trigger, decide in advance how you want to respond. Not how you usually respond, but how your wisest, strongest self would respond. Write these chosen responses down. Third, when the trigger occurs in real life, pause before reacting. Take 3 conscious breaths. In that pause, remember the response you chose. Fourth, act from that conscious choice rather than from impulse. Over time, this practice transforms you. Your default responses become wiser because you've trained them to be. You stop being a slave to your first impulse and become the master of your actions. People notice the change. You become someone who can be counted on to respond with wisdom and strength regardless of circumstances. And most importantly, you respect yourself because you're living according to your values rather than being controlled by your reactions. The power of intentional attention. Your attention is the most valuable resource you possess, yet most people treat it as if it's worthless. They give it away freely to whatever is loudest, most dramatic, or most immediate. They let news headlines hijack it. Social media algorithms direct it. Other people's problems consume it. Then they wonder why they feel drained, scattered, and powerless. The Stoics understood something that modern neuroscience is only now confirming. Where you place your attention determines not just your mood or your thoughts, but the actual quality and direction of your entire life. Epictetus taught, "Pay attention to what occupies your mind, for what occupies the mind governs life." This is one of the most practical pieces of wisdom the Stoics offered. If your attention is constantly on problems, you'll experience life as one problem after another. If your attention is constantly on what you lack, you'll feel perpetual scarcity. If your attention is constantly on other people's opinions, you'll live in anxiety and insecurity. But if you deliberately direct your attention to what you can control, what you're building, and what you value, your entire experience of life transforms. The challenge is that we live in an attention economy. Thousands of entities are competing for your focus every single day. Social media companies have teams of engineers whose only job is to capture and hold your attention. News organizations profit from keeping you anxious and outraged. Even well-meaning people in your life make constant demands on your focus. If you don't actively protect and direct your attention, it will be stolen from you piece by piece until you've given away your entire life to other people's agendas. Here's how the Stoics practiced intentional attention. First thing each morning, before consuming any external information, they would deliberately set their mental focus for the day. Marcus Aurelius would remind himself of his principles, his priorities, and his purpose. He would consciously decide what deserved his attention and what didn't. This morning practice created a filter that protected him from being pulled in every direction throughout the day. Let's make this practical for your life. When you wake up tomorrow, resist the urge to immediately check your phone. Instead, spend the first 10 minutes setting your attention intentionally. Ask yourself these questions. What matters most to me today? What do I want to create or contribute? Who do I want to be in my interactions? What deserves my mental energy and what doesn't? This simple practice creates a foundation that makes you far less vulnerable to attention hijacking throughout the day. Second, the Stoics practiced what we might call attention boundaries. They were fiercely protective of what they allowed into their consciousness. If something didn't serve their purpose, strengthen their character, or contribute to their goals, they simply didn't give it attention. This wasn't about being cold or uncaring. It was about recognizing that attention is finite and precious. You can't possibly focus on everything, so you might as well focus on what actually matters. Create your own attention boundaries. Decide what information sources you'll consume and when. Set specific times for checking messages rather than being constantly available. When someone tries to pull you into drama or negativity that doesn't concern you, practice saying, "I'm choosing not to give that situation my energy." Notice how liberating it feels to actively protect your attention rather than passively surrendering it to whatever is demanding it loudest. Third, practice returning your attention to the present moment throughout the day. The Stoics knew that most suffering happens when your mind wanders to the past with regret or to the future with anxiety. But when your attention is fully here, fully now, you're in your power. You're not reliving what you can't change or worrying about what hasn't happened. You're engaged with the only moment where you can actually think, choose, and act. Set reminders on your phone, or create environmental cues that prompt you to check where your attention is. When you notice it's wandered to rumination, worry, or distraction, gently bring it back to now. What are you doing in this moment? What can you notice with your senses right here? What small action can you take right now that aligns with your values? This practice of returning your attention to the present is like training a muscle. The more you do it, the stronger your ability becomes. Remember, wherever your attention goes, your energy flows. And wherever your energy flows, your life grows. If you want to know what you truly value, look at where your attention consistently goes. If you want to change your life, change where you place your attention. The Stoics knew this. That's why they were so intentional about guarding and directing their focus. They understood that a scattered attention creates a scattered life, but a focused attention creates extraordinary results and deep peace. The wisdom of measured response. Seneca wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." This principle applies not just to anger, but to all emotional reactions. In our instant culture where everything demands an immediate response, the ability to deliberately delay your reaction is a superpower. Most people say things they regret, make decisions they reverse, and create problems they have to fix simply because they responded too quickly, before wisdom had a chance to enter the situation. The Stoics practiced what we might call measured response. They trained themselves to resist the pressure to react instantly. When something happened that could trigger an emotional reaction, they would intentionally create space before responding. This wasn't about being slow or indecisive. It was about ensuring that their response came from their rational mind and their values rather than from reactive emotion. Think about the last time you sent an angry message and regretted it within hours. Or the time you made a decision in frustration that you reversed days later. Or when you said something in the heat of the moment that damaged a relationship. All of these situations share a common element: too much speed, too little space between stimulus and response. If you had waited even a few hours before acting, you likely would have chosen differently and saved yourself significant pain. Here's how to practice measured response in your daily life. First, create a personal rule that you never respond to emotionally charged situations immediately. If someone sends you a message that upsets you, wait at least an hour before responding. If you feel angry during a conversation, excuse yourself to take a walk before continuing. If you're about to make a significant decision while emotional, sleep on it first. This simple delay gives your prefrontal cortex time to come back online, and your reactive emotions time to settle. Second, use the practice of written drafting. When you want to respond to something while emotional, write out your response but don't send it. Save it as a draft. Come back to it after a few hours or the next day. You'll often find that your perspective has shifted, your emotion has calmed, and you want to say something quite different. This practice has saved countless relationships and prevented innumerable regrets. Third, before responding to any challenging situation, ask yourself 3 questions. Will this matter in 5 years? Am I responding from my wisest self or my reactive self? What response would I respect myself for tomorrow? These questions create just enough pause to shift you from reaction to conscious response. They remind you that how you respond defines your character and shapes your future in ways that the initial event never could. The Stoics also understood that not every situation requires a response at all. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. Someone insults you and you simply don't engage. Someone tries to pull you into drama and you decline to participate. Someone baits you into an argument and you respond with silence. This isn't weakness. This is strength. It shows that you can't be controlled by other people's chaos. It demonstrates that your peace is more valuable than proving a point. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that he didn't have to have an opinion about everything. You don't have to respond to every provocation. You don't have to engage with every criticism. You don't have to defend yourself against every accusation. Sometimes measured response means no response at all, and there's profound power in that choice. Practice this today. When something triggers you, when someone says something that normally would get an immediate reaction from you, pause, count to 10 slowly, take 3 deep breaths, then ask yourself, does this really require my response? If it does, what response would my wisest self choose? If it doesn't, can I simply let it pass without engaging? Watch how this practice transforms your relationships, reduces your stress, and increases your self-respect. The freedom in forgiveness. The Stoics had a surprisingly mature view of forgiveness that modern culture often misses. They didn't see forgiveness as something you do for the other person. They saw it as something you do for yourself. Holding on to resentment, nursing grudges, and refusing to forgive is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to suffer. It chains you to the past and gives people who hurt you continued power over your present and your future. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. When someone wrongs you and you hold on to bitterness, you become like them. You let their worst moment define your ongoing experience. You give them real estate in your mind that they're occupying without paying rent. But when you forgive, when you release the resentment, you free yourself. You take back your power. You refuse to let their actions continue to hurt you beyond the original event. Forgiveness doesn't mean what happened was okay. It doesn't mean you're excusing their behavior or saying it didn't matter. It doesn't even mean you have to reconcile with them or allow them back into your life. Stoic forgiveness simply means you're releasing the emotional charge you're carrying about what happened. You're choosing to stop reliving the hurt. You're deciding that your peace is more important than your resentment. Here's why this matters so much. Every moment you spend thinking about how someone wronged you, rehearsing your grievances, imagining conversations where you tell them off, that's a moment stolen from your present. That's energy you could be using to build something beautiful, create meaningful experiences, or simply enjoy your life. The person who hurt you has moved on. They're not thinking about you, but you're letting them occupy your consciousness, your emotional energy, your peace. Who's really being punished? The practice of forgiveness begins with recognizing what resentment is costing you. Take an honest inventory. What relationship, situation, or past event are you still carrying resentment about? Now notice what it feels like in your body and mind when you think about it. Tension, heaviness, anger, bitterness. That's the cost you're paying to hold on to this. Is it worth it? Is this person or situation worth giving that much of your life to? Next, understand that forgiveness is a decision, not a feeling. You don't have to feel warm and fuzzy about what happened. You simply decide that you're done carrying it. You consciously choose to release the emotional weight. One powerful way to practice this is through a forgiveness ritual. Write a letter to the person who hurt you, expressing everything you feel. Then write a second letter from your wiser self to yourself, offering forgiveness and release. Finally, safely burn or destroy both letters as a symbolic act of letting go. The Stoics also practiced forgiveness through understanding. Seneca reminded his students that people who hurt others are often suffering themselves. A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary. People who lash out, betray, or harm others are usually acting from their own pain, ignorance, or weakness. This doesn't excuse their behavior, but it helps you see it in context. When you understand that hurt people, it becomes easier to release your grip on resentment. Finally, recognize that forgiveness is often a process, not a one-time event. You might need to choose forgiveness repeatedly as memories resurface or emotions arise. Each time you notice resentment returning, simply recommit to release. I've decided to forgive this. I'm not carrying this anymore. I'm choosing my peace over this pain. With time and repetition, the emotional charge diminishes and eventually disappears entirely. The freedom that comes from forgiveness is profound. You stop being defined by what was done to you. You stop being a victim of the past. You reclaim your energy, your attention, and your emotional well-being. You become someone who can't be permanently damaged by others because you refuse to give them that power. This is the strength the Stoics cultivated through forgiveness, not weakness that pretends everything is fine, but strength that refuses to be imprisoned by what others have done. The courage of values-based living. The final principle that creates unshakable inner strength is living according to clearly defined values regardless of circumstances. The Stoics believed that character isn't what you do when everything is going well. Character is what you do when everything is falling apart. And the only way to maintain character in chaos is to have deeply rooted values that guide you no matter what's happening around you. Epictetus taught his students, first say to yourself what you would be and then do what you have to do. This is the essence of values-based living. You decide who you want to be, what principles you'll live by, what lines you won't cross. Then you honor those decisions regardless of what's convenient, popular, or easy in the moment. Your values become your compass, keeping you oriented toward truth even when everything around you is shifting. Most people don't actually know what their core values are. They've never taken the time to consciously define them. So they live reactively, making decisions based on emotions, social pressure, or immediate circumstances. This creates an inconsistent life where who you are changes depending on who you're with or what situation you're in. There's no stable center, no reliable foundation. And without that foundation, stress and chaos knock you around like waves battering a boat without an anchor. The Stoics were different. Marcus Aurelius had crystal clear values: justice, wisdom, courage, and self-discipline. Every decision he made, every challenge he faced, every temptation that arose, he filtered it through these values. When something aligned with his values, he pursued it. When something contradicted his values, he refused it. This made decision-making dramatically simpler and gave him enormous strength because he wasn't constantly conflicted or second-guessing himself. Here's how to develop values-based living starting today. First, get clear on your core values. These are the principles that define who you are at your best, the qualities you want to embody regardless of circumstances. Take time to write down your top 5 values, not what you think they should be, but what they actually are for you. Maybe it's integrity, courage, compassion, growth, freedom, service, creativity. Whatever resonates most deeply with your soul, write it down. Second, define what each value means in practice. Don't just say, I value integrity. Describe what integrity looks like in your daily decisions and behaviors. What does it mean to live with integrity in your work, your relationships, your commitments? The more specific you can be, the more useful your values become as a guide for action. Third, use your values to make decisions. When you're facing a choice or a challenge, don't ask, what do I feel like doing?
Or what's easiest?
Ask, what action aligns with my values? If courage is one of your values and you're facing a scary conversation, courage tells you to have the conversation even though it's uncomfortable. If integrity is a value and someone offers you a shortcut that involves compromise, integrity tells you to decline even if it's harder. Your values override your impulses and your circumstances. Fourth, review your values regularly. The Stoics practiced daily reflection, examining whether their actions aligned with their principles. Each evening, Marcus Aurelius would review his day and ask, did I live according to my values today? Where did I fall short? Where was I strong? What will I do differently tomorrow? This practice keeps your values alive and active rather than just being nice words you wrote down once and forgot about. The power of values-based living is that it makes you unshakable. When your sense of self is rooted in internal principles rather than external circumstances, nothing can truly shake you. You might face losses, failures, betrayals, and setbacks, but your core remains solid because it's built on who you are, not what's happening to you. People can take things from you, but they can't take your values unless you surrender them. This is what the Stoics meant by being unshakable. Not that nothing affects you, but that nothing destroys you. Not that you never feel challenged, but that you never forget who you are. Not that life can't knock you down, but that it can't break your spirit because your spirit is rooted in values that external circumstances can't touch. Throughout this journey, we've explored 8 powerful principles for developing unshakable inner strength. From taking ownership of your responses to choosing deliberate perceptions to practicing acceptance, response selection, intentional attention, measured response, forgiveness, and values-based living. Each principle is a tool. Together, they form a complete system for navigating life's chaos while maintaining your center. The Stoics didn't promise that life would be easy if you followed their philosophy. They promised something far more valuable, that you would be strong, that you would be free, that you would maintain your dignity and your peace regardless of what life threw at you. And that's exactly what these principles deliver when you practice them consistently. Remember, strength isn't about never struggling. It's about refusing to be broken by the struggle. Freedom isn't about controlling circumstances. It's about controlling your response to circumstances. Peace isn't the absence of chaos. It's the presence of wisdom in the middle of chaos. And all of this is available to you right now, not when circumstances improve, but through the choices you make in this moment. Start today with just one principle. Choose the one that resonates most deeply with you, and commit to practicing it for the next 30 days. Watch how it transforms not just how you feel, but who you become. Then add another principle, then another. This is how you build a life of unshakable strength, one conscious choice at a time.